It has been some time since I last made a DC character histories video, and I was thinking to myself the other day, you know what? Let's get back into that series. As you all know, if you have been following me and keeping up to date with the DC Character Histories playlist, I did start to slow down to make some more room for other content on my channel. And like I did say, I was not done with this series, and I'm certainly not, because today I do have another character for you in Hugo Strange. Now let me just tell you right now, when I was writing this episode, it was a little mind-numbing at points writing this character, because I just started to realize, like, oh my god, it ends the same way for him every single time, and it's always the same thing. So in saying that, don't click away. I did try to make this as fun as possible, and you know, if you are trying to get more into the DC universe, it will help you to understand who this character is a little bit more. So Hugo Strange is a brilliant but insane psychologist and scientist. He is usually employed at Arkham Asylum and has an unhealthy obsession with the Batman. As many of my video gamers out there know, Hugo is most popular from his Batman Arkham City appearance, and many others may remember him from the Gotham television show. Hugo is one of Batman's first recurring villains and was one of the first to discover Batman's identity. Now, before we get into his histories and some of his most important stories in the DC world, here's some of his character data. His first debut was Detective Comics number 36, which was February 1940. He is based out of Gotham City. His height is 5'10", weight is 170 pounds. His eyes are gray and his hair is none, so he's bald. His powers and abilities, technically doesn't have any powers or abilities, but he has a brilliant psychological and deductive mind. And most importantly, his enemies are Batman. Alright, so let's get into Hugo Strange's strange beginning. I know that was awful, don't worry about it. When Hugo Strange was first introduced, he was a criminal mastermind, robbing from banks and any other types of valuable locations. Strange created this concentrated lightning machine which would create intense fog so he could rob banks with his henchmen unseen. When Batman learns of this, he begins to investigate Hugo Strange. Although Strange planned ahead and got in front of Batman's plans by ambushing him with his henchmen and taking the Dark Knight captive. In Strange's lair, Batman is hanging from a rope tied to his wrists, where Hugo Strange lashes and whips him. Batman breaks free, gasses the room, and defeats Hugo Strange, sending him to jail. Hugo, of course, starts to immediately plan his escape. After escaping, Hugo freed 5 insane patients from the asylum and began to run tests on them. Hugo turned these patients into 15-foot tall monsters that he unleashes onto the streets of Gotham while his henchmen continue to rob more banks. The monsters end up capturing and taking Batman to Hugo Strange, where he in turn induces Batman with the monster drug. And in about 18 hours, Batman would turn into a hulking monster. Batman, of course, manages to convince 2 of the monsters to fight each other while he configures an antidote. After curing himself in a record time, Batman defeats the other monsters and fights Strange on a cliff, where Batman kicks him off and sends him to his apparent death. Batman has his suspicions that he is not dead, and Hugo does indeed return a couple of months later. This time, Hugo Strange tries to spread a fear toxin around Gotham City, but of course fails. Batman in turn sends him falling from a high distance again, which is believed to result in his death. You gotta love 40s, 50s, and 60s comic books, because it all sounds like it was made by a 5-year-old kid who somehow applied to be a comic book writer and got the job. If it hasn't already sounded weird, just wait, it gets even stranger from here. Hugo Strange isn't brought back until 37 years later in 1977. Turns out Strange never died and has lived in Europe, where his criminal activities have prospered, since there is no Batman or other superhero to challenge him. So getting bored, Strange decides to go back to Gotham to challenge Batman again, but this time Strange uses an alias and goes by Dr. Todd Hunter, where he opens a private clinic for Gotham's wealthiest citizens. Strange would take these patients and turn them into mindless creatures or monsters. Guy has an addiction to monsters. Bruce Wayne one day checks into the clinic to tend to some burns he received from fighting another villain named Dr. Phosphorus. Due to Bruce's information being placed in Strange's clinic, Hugo is capable of dissecting Batman's identity as Bruce Wayne. Trying to ruin Bruce's life, Hugo Strange tries to auction off the identity of the Batman to 3 people: Rupert Thorne, Penguin, and Joker. Rupert Thorne, a political criminal of Gotham, doesn't want to lose to the Penguin or Joker, so Thorne abducts Hugo Strange and beats him in hopes he reveals Batman's identity. Although Hugo never tells Thorne the identity of the Batman as he dies to his injuries. It's not over yet though, because Hugo Strange returns as a ghost to haunt Rupert Thorne for what he did to him. Driving Thorne insane, he literally confesses his crimes to the authorities and is sent to Arkham Asylum. So yeah, if it's not already weird enough, let's continue. He returns as a ghost 5 years later in 1982 to haunt Rupert Thorne again. It is revealed that Strange once again never died as he used yoga techniques to slow his heart rate down to undetectable levels while Thorne's men beat him. Strange also conveniently reveals that he created the ghost through technological devices that simulates a ghost appearance. With Strange's revenge of Thorne complete, he was free to focus solely on the Batman once again. Strange literally creates a replica of Wayne Manor and the Batcave and robot versions of Alfred and Robin. Hugo thought to himself that if he couldn't be Batman, then no one could be. So in the final confrontation, and quote-unquote final confrontation in the Wayne Manor replica, Batman and Robin defeat Hugo Strange. Strange then, of course, activates a detonator for a bomb to destroy the entire manor, which Batman and Robin escape, but Hugo Strange is again believed to be dead. If only we could end this nightmare of a story, Hugo Strange returns again 4 years later in 1986, where we find out that he never conveniently died in the explosion and that it was a robot he created of himself. This time around, Hugo Strange attempts to destroy Batman's life by bankrupting Wayne Enterprises and branding Batman as a criminal. This is obviously thwarted by Batman, as he strongly convinces Strange that he was led to believe that Bruce Wayne is Batman. With Strange's brilliant psychological mind, Batman used reverse psychology so intelligently that Hugo was sent to prison and spent his days going insane due to the fact that he cannot decide whether he believes if Bruce Wayne is Batman or not. So maybe we pretend that the golden, silver, bronze age of Hugo Strange was never a thing, and let's just move on to the modern age after Crisis on Infinite Earths. So as most DC characters do, Hugo Strange underwent a lot of changes after that event. Hugo Strange grew up on the east side of Gotham City and was abandoned as a child. He was raised in an orphanage and still found ways to put himself through school. He became a professor of psychiatry at Gotham State University, but was suspended after there were suspicions of his bizarre experiments. Hugo Strange would go off to borrow money from Sal Maroni and Carmine Falcone to develop his own laboratory. He then bribed workers in Arkham Asylum to send him incurably insane patients so that he could have test subjects. Strange's experience experiments turn these patients into gigantic, cannibalistic monster men. Strange then sends out these creatures to commit crimes so he could gather the money he borrowed from Maroni and Falcone. Batman, of course, gets involved and tracks these monsters back to their hideout, where he finds Hugo Strange's lab. Batman is captured and is thrown to the monsters as a meal, but of course he fights off the monsters and escapes with ease. Now, though, Strange becomes enthralled with the idea that Batman may genetically be a perfect human. Strange then makes the perfect monster from a source of Batman's blood, and he sends all of his remaining monsters against Maroni and Falcone to settle the debt. Strange in turn decides to destroy his laboratory and any link to him and the experiments. Sometime later in the Batman Prey storyline, Hugo Strange appears on live television where he talks about how he claims to understand the motives of the Batman. GCPD creates a task force to apprehend the Batman, with Hugo Strange acting as a professional consultant. Hugo's obsession with the Batman leads him to wear his own custom-made batsuit, where he dresses as him to try and enter the mind of Batman. While attempting to learn everything he can about the Dark Knight, Strange comes to the conclusion that his identity is Bruce Wayne. Strange then tries multiple things to throw Batman off his game, such as convincing the people of Gotham that Batman is a threat, or creating recordings of Martha and Thomas Wayne blaming Bruce for their death. Hugo would even kidnap the mayor's daughter, dressed as Batman, to turn more people against him. Batman kept his composure and focus and confronted Hugo Strange. This is where Batman once again uses reverse psychology to trick Strange into thinking he was wrong about the identity of Batman. This is also where the GCPD task force finds Hugo Strange in the replica Batsuit, believing it to be the real Batman. They chased Hugo to the river of Gotham, shot him twice, and he fell in the river and disappeared. So, because it seems like Hugo Strange can't die, he returns in another storyline, Batman Terror. This is where Strange breaks Scarecrow out of Arkham Asylum so they can team up to defeat Batman. Hugo's plan is to mix Scarecrow's fear toxin with a powerful hallucinogen to dig deeper into Batman's mind. Scarecrow ends up betraying Strange and exposes him to the toxin they created, which sent Strange into a delusional frenzy of fear and terror. In a climactic battle between Batman, Strange, and Scarecrow in an abandoned oceanside mansion, the mansion burns down and all three of them fall into the ocean, with Hugo Strange, you guessed it, disappearing. Okay, after what feels like the 800th time dying and coming back to life, Hugo Strange returns once again in another storyline, Batman Transference. As if he hasn't vowed to do this before, he vows again to kill Batman and take his identity. Strange uses another Batsuit replica and kidnaps Catwoman, where he gets her to tell him everything about her relationship with the Batman. Hugo Strange then finds himself as a psychological evaluator for Wayne Enterprises employees. How he found himself in this position blows my mind, because you gotta think, Bruce Wayne knows literally everything at one time. There is nothing that could go down in his company that he wouldn't know about. And how Hugo Strange could just apply for a job in Wayne Enterprises and get it without Bruce Wayne knowing doesn't make sense to me. Even if Hugo Strange was to use a fake alias or whatever, Batman would still know. Anyways, rant over. During Bruce's session, he is confronted by a gun-wielding Hugo Strange. Bruce still manages to escape the locked room they are in at gunpoint and returns to Wayne Tower as Batman. They fight on the rooftop where Batman defeats Strange, leaves him tied up for the police, and since it's much of the same thing over and over again, long story short, Hugo Strange escapes the police, somehow finds a way to track down Robin and Nightwing and interrogates them to tell him the identity of the Batman. They don't tell Hugo, and he once again starts to question his sanity, and because he's losing his mind over the fact of who Batman truly is, he literally voluntarily checks himself into Arkham Asylum. Strange does have a couple of more stories in this modern age continuity, but it's nothing too notable, and you know what, let's just get on to the New 52. So in the New 52, the stories here get a little slimmer for a lot of characters because New 52 didn't last all that long, and now DC is in DC Rebirth, and Rebirth hasn't been around all that long much either, only since 2017. So in New 52, Hugo Strange walked out on his wife and child 16 years ago and was hired as the head of Wayne Enterprises in Bruce Wayne's absence as a child. Strange studied the anatomy and physiology of the brain, and after the first appearance of Batman, Hugo Strange left Wayne Enterprises and went to Arkham Asylum, where he worked closely to Harleen Quinzel. Soon after, the same thing started to happen where he became obsessed with Batman, his identity, and again, created monster men from patients to combat him. And if you haven't seen some of my previous DC character histories video, the one about the crime syndicate, check out that video if you haven't yet. When the crime syndicate of Earth 3 came to take over our Earth, Hugo Strange was one of the villains who joined to help them. Okay, and finally heading into DC Rebirth, the most recent and current DC continuity. In this soft reboot of the DC universe, Hugo Strange forgets the identity of the Batman. His addiction of creating monster men is apparent as he attacks Gotham City with a small army of monsters based off of what Strange perceives as Batman's greatest flaws: ego, grief, manipulation, childhood, and fear. Batman confronts Strange, but he is wearing a bat suit called the Suicide Suit. Essentially, if Strange is to be physically harmed, the suit will detonate. Strange is of course using this suit in hopes that Batman will surrender the cape and cowl, since Batman doesn't kill. While Nightwing fights the monsters in Gotham, Batman outthinks Hugo Strange by receiving help from Clayface. Clayface created an airtight seal around the penthouse that Batman and Strange were in, which caused Strange to lose oxygen in the suit. Strange had no choice but to take off the suit, which left Batman victorious. Hugo Strange failed to realize that Batman's flaws are actually his motivation in protecting Gotham. Wow, okay, we're done Hugo Strange's DC character history. I'm sure there are a couple more stories that I may have missed, but nothing too important. You know, it's literally the same thing over and over and over again. Guy dies and fakes his death. He is so obsessed with Batman, so much so that he literally wants to be him, and he was never successful in any of his attempts. Comic book wise, you may be thinking to yourself, ooh, that is not a good look on the character of Dr. Hugo Strange. But I will say this: if you haven't played the Batman Arkham City game and you're interested in video games, I would highly suggest playing that game because they handle Hugo Strange so much better than any of these comics do in that game alone. He's literally just a mastermind with a psychiatric background who wants to steady minds of criminals or any other type of demented soul, and has an addiction of knowing who Batman is in the first place. And it's pretty much simple. It's kept at that. There's no death and coming back to life and creating monster men and all of this stuff. If you want a really good representation of Dr. Hugo Strange, I suggest you play Arkham City. But anyways, everyone, that is it for this DC character histories video. It has been a little while since I made one, and it was really nice to come back with another video, even though writing this episode was a pain in the ass. So just like usual, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to keep up to date with all my videos, and if you like this playlist in general. And just like usual, everyone, I will talk to you all very soon.